on to our plenary session of the conference. Our distinguished panel includes experts, each bringing a unique perspective on historical discourse. Please join me in welcoming our speakers, Dr. N. Casting. Dr. N. Casting studies modern literature from South Asia, especially those written in North Indian languages like Hindi, Bengali, and Urdu. Recently, she has focused on how the modern history of the Indian subcontinent is written in literature and the challenges of representing the past. Her work on the 1947 partition of India has been central to two of her books in French and an upcoming monograph. She is exploring how literature can provide a cross-cultural perspective on the study of partitions. Currently, she is researching the life stories written by refugees in Delhi camps after the partition. Dr. Casting is also interested in gender studies, especially in cultural practices and gender roles, and has published 2 books in this field. Please welcome Dr. N. Casting from France. Our next panelist is serving as the Director, Gurmani Center for Language and Literature, Lums University, Lahore, Dr. Ali Usman Qasmi. Born and raised in Lahore, Dr. Ali Usman Qasmi is a historian of modern South Asia and Islamic reform movements. He has published extensively on his areas of expertise, including 3 monographs and 3 edited volumes. His most recent monograph is titled Qaum Mulk Sultanat, Citizenship and National Belonging in Pakistan, which has been published from Stanford University Press. Since 2012, Dr. Qasmi has been teaching history at Lums University's School of Humanities and Social Sciences. It's my great honor to welcome Dr. Ali Usman Qasmi to the stage. Our third panelist is Dr. Philipp Zehmisch. His research combines political anthropology, subaltern, borderland, and migration studies to understand the long-lasting legacies of the partition of British India. His postdoctoral project, Dialects of Partition, Ethics of Collaboration and Resistance in Post-Colonial Pakistan, started with a postdoctoral research fellowship at the Center for Advanced Studies, LMU, Munich. It developed further while teaching anthropology and sociology as assistant professor at the Lahore University of Management Sciences, LUMS, 2018 till 2020. Dr. Zehmisch earned his PhD at LMU Munich. His doctoral thesis, Mini India, the Politics of Migration and Subalternity in the Andaman Islands, received 2 dissertation awards. Further, he published multiple research articles and co-edited Manifestation of History, Time, Space, and Community in the Andaman Islands. Please welcome Dr. Philipp Zehmisch to the stage.
Okay, I won't do that button again. Okay, well, thank you for being here, and you've already heard from me, so I promise I won't monopolize this panel. I kind of snuck my keynote address into the opening comments. So what I thought would be really maybe perhaps more productive would just be some opening comments for me to get us started, and then to start a dialogue among our participants in this plenary session, so you can hear from each of them, but then also they can engage with each other perhaps. And from the audience, if that's possible. I don't know if that's okay. So we are here to consider regional history, as I mentioned. Okay. Oh, that's it. Thank you very much. So yeah, we are here to consider regional history and what does it mean for us as scholars working in quite diverse disciplines, as well as diverse national contexts and all different universities, different institutions, and how that can influence our work in multiple kind of registers. So both understanding regional history and what it does for our understanding of this place and other places, but also how regional history interacts with other kind of dimensions of historical representation in kind of in locational terms, right? So thinking about local versus the regional versus the kind of larger national level and international, transnational implications of such work. So there were some questions that were brought to us to define our work in this panel. I'll read those off, and then what I'd like to do is pose questions to each of our panel members and invite them to think about those with us. So we were asked to consider how we defined regional history as a subject in the broader context of the field of history, how regional history is distinct from local, national, and world history. And again, as I mentioned in my comments earlier, there's a kind of penchant for the world level historical narratives at the expense often these days of the more local and regional. Third, why regional history is important to the study and understanding of the peculiar nature of socioeconomic, sociopolitical, and socioecological nature of the region, of the specific regions in the meta-narrative of history. Fourth, what is the academic importance of regional history as a subject, and how is the field emerging? What are the key debates of in the field of history, and where does regional history fit into those key debates? And again, some of these things I tried to address in my opening comments, but we'll explore in greater depth here. And then lastly, how can this conference shape the study of regional histories more broadly, providing a model to others and also engaging with other forms of regional history? And also what can it contribute to our understanding of Lyallpur as a place in time and a place today? So having framed, these are the kind of overarching questions that frame our work. I'm going to invite the members of the panel to engage with certain questions. Hello, Musadaq. I was going to ask you first.
So Mr. Musadaq Zulqurnain here, he joins us for the plenary session, which is chairing Dr. N. Murphy. Please welcome, sir.
Welcome. But maybe I'll let you settle down a bit, and then I'll ask you next, okay? So I'll start with you, Dr. Zehmisch, if that's okay. If you could just comment a little bit on the importance of the region in contemporary work in your own field of anthropology as well as in history. And I'm going to time you maybe 5 minutes, and I might interrupt. I want so everyone has a chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thanks everyone for being here and for also filling this room, and also for the organizers for this great event. So I think what me being an anthropologist, I've always been working let's say, by considering history. History has always informed the questions we have, and history, first of all, also informs what anthropologists, interlocutors say. So here is, and there's something that really where you have a common ground between anthropology and history, and that is essentially colonialism. So colonialism now, if we look at, so we have a colonial past between both disciplines and also other disciplines that have formed in colonial times. So now regional work has been criticized in many disciplines as being kind of part of a framework of area studies. So why is area studies colonial? Because these disciplines were developed in colonial times. There was relations of power and knowledge. Knowledge was created for a colonial purpose. And then we came into this phase, the so-called decolonization of the global south, in which decolonization meant a shift of transfer of power. And at the same time, after Second World War, in the US, there was area studies developed. And area studies meant a new form of neocolonial domination through knowledge in a so-called decolonizing world, and where regional specialists would contribute knowledge to certain regions in order to inform, let's say, power politics and other frameworks. So here the contemporary critique and decolonization is as vibrant as it probably hasn't been before right now, an epistemic decolonization. So what has happened is a transfer of power, but not an epistemic decolonization. So here, regional work is kind of unfairly, in our view, framed as something really coming into a colonial framework. I work on a region, I represent that knowledge to the world, and that's how you can better control these people through the knowledge you generate. So how can we kind of, we in our special issue, Rethinking Regions, Locality and Circulation in South Asia, that we both recently came out this month, actually, in which we affirm our commitment to the region, because the region is something where we say this is actually how people think, how empirically, even as anthropologists or as historian, how we interact with people is through thinking historically. So people have a historical consciousness, and this historical consciousness is very often regionally driven because it comes out from their experience. So regional knowledge is that how people feel, so we how people define themselves. So as long as there's the commitment to the regional with our interlocutors and let's say in broader people's consciousness, so we perceive there's a need to continue to work regionally. But the question is then how to decolonize that epistemically. So earlier, I think the problem and the critique was of regional studies was that people would artificially separate a certain ethnic group, a tribe, a caste, and put them as if they were in a timeless kind of vacuum in which they don't interact. And of course, this is something that especially anthropologists have been accused of putting people in a different time frame, and the other othering them. But this, I think, is has been overcome, and we believe that we should apply ideas of transnationalism, transregionalism, globalization, and think the region through them. So rethinking the region means thinking them through all these frameworks. So, and it's not true that regions have been cut off, isolated pieces that can be researched separately, but they should be especially be researched through the aspect of circulation of knowledge, to the aspect of how they're composed. And we had, Sir had mentioned here before in his speech, for example, how Lyallpur was constituted by canal colonization, by migrants from the other Punjab, from East Punjab, and how here British colonial frameworks created an environment and also an economic landscape now. So this is a very good example actually of a trans-regional constitution and to some extent also a globalized constitution of a region. And here, hence, regionality is a very important framework through which one should study history and other themes. Another aspect I think that's important here is the vernacular. So the vernacular can be understood both as in terms of language, but also in terms of culture. I think also here an emphasis in Lyallpur has been on the vernacular in terms of language, but I think also in culture. And here the vernacular in terms of culture can be also be perceived as the everyday in which different, let's say, cultural elements mix with each other and can be put into relation to the region and also their transnational frameworks. Then my last point, it's also we should and could provincialize South Asia as a region. So there was a very influential work of provincializing South Asia, provincializing Europe by Gyanendra Pandey, and we should also provincialize South Asia and look at what are actually the nationalist frameworks, what are the nationalist histories that kind of limit our frameworks. It's called something that has been framed as methodological nationalism. Where can we kind of look at the transnational element, the trans-regional cross-cultural element? And I think this is especially in the field of Punjabi studies very important. And I'm glad also that the scholars from, let's say, Sikh studies and other regional studies. So here Punjabiness is as such something that is a cross-border formation. So, and I think we can't study this region without these connections, and hence we should provincialize it. At this point, I would like to hand back to Anne for the next question.
Thank you, Dr. Zehmisch. I'll work out the order, which is a different order than is in the book. I'm going to ask Dr. Qasmi next, and then Dr. Kastan, and then Mr. Zulqurnain last. I think maybe it'd be nice to end with your with comments from you to help us kind of again initiate this conference. So, Dr. Qasmi, I lost my question for you. One moment. So I've been reading your recent book, so my question is inspired by that reading. And that is, how is our understanding of Pakistan, in broader terms, enhanced by engagement with regional history? And how do you see these domains, the national and the regional, productively interacting and maybe transforming our understanding of both?
Thank you so much. It's such a great honor to be here, and this is, I think, a fantastic theme to start this conversation about history and recognizing the importance of the regional or the local. And I must say that I also stand guilty of focusing too much on larger narratives in the center, although I do, in my teaching, however, I do teach courses on regional histories, on local histories, on vernaculars, and vernacular conceptualizations of theory, and so on and so forth. So before I directly respond to your question, let me just frame it in a different way. And I'm reminded of a project which was taken by our former dean at LUMS, Anjum Altaf. It was a study of what he called small cities. And he was looking at cities which are like within a 50-kilometer or 100-kilometer radius of Lahore, which technically would be, by American standards, would be a suburb, right? So if you look at Gujranwala, Qusur, Sheikhupura, and cities like that, which are important industrial hubs, and yet they have, over the past 30, 40 years, they have failed to develop as important urban, cultural, or intellectual centers. Why? Because the way Lahore has expanded, and Lahore has all the major educational, commercial, other facilities, the connectivity via roads, motorways, which means that the industrialist in Sheikhupura, in Qusur, in Gujranwala would rather live close to Thokar-Niaz-Beg, which is close to the motorway, and it takes them like 50 minutes then to drive to their industrial unit. So what has happened, and this was Anjum Altaf's thesis, and what has happened is that the local elite from these industrial units, from these cities, they have all shifted to Lahore, which has had a significant impact on the social, cultural life of these cities, right? So what you're doing then in Lyallpur is very significant, where you're trying to build something of your own because you recognize the importance of the local. Now, and this is where I think, since what Musadaq Saab pointed out, the importance of archives, the importance of for writing histories, and this is where I would like to bring in and refer to the works of very young Pakistani scholars, Aisha Shafiq and Abdul Ijaz, and I encourage all of you to please read their works. And Aisha Shafiq in particular has recently published a book on where her unit of analysis is bar or doab. She's looking at Rachna doab, and she's looking at through the lens of environmental history. So through environmental history, she's trying to explain as to how local can be a very important unit of analysis. And it's basically then, like through that unit, she's able to explain the processes of accumulation and disposition. Because as we know, these are the regions where a massive engineering project was undertaken during the British period, which led to unprecedented level of state intrusion into social and cultural lives of local inhabitants, and how the entire social hierarchy of the region changed, where new elites were formed, new Jat identities, new caste identities were formed, and the local inhabitants, Janglis as they were called, rather pejoratively, they were dispossessed, marginalized, and how an entire, different kinds of communities were dispossessed, right? And how so through that lens, through that idea of the local, or through that kind of like idea of writing a local history, we can understand as to how, at least over the past 200 years, our notions about land, possession, property, right to water, right to land, right to forest, how that has changed, how, in a very Foucauldian term, the state which has emerged has penetrated, which were previously largely self-governed regions and communities, right? So that's, I think, a very important aspect of local history, and one area, particular area where I'll encourage young students to focus on. And I would also add here that this is where I think historians have not done such a good job. This is where fiction writers come in, and I'm reminded of my colleague Zahid Hassan, who has written a fantastic novel, Tassi Dharti. I'm reminded of Nan Suk, who is sitting here, who has, through his fiction, written the stories of these people and these regions. So these are the people who, through vernacular, through literature, are writing these stories, preserving these stories, and the historians have unable to do that. Now, if I still have some time, I'll just quickly refer. I'll say that yes, we must provincialize South Asia. We must decenter Delhi. We must decenter Lahore. We must decenter Islamabad, and we must also recognize, like at the end of the day, when we all say, when we all refer to provincializing Europe, that European history is also regional history, masquerading as universal history. That we have sort of like universalized European ideas and categories as if they are actually universal when they are not. So what's the kind of like solution to that? And I would say that this is where the concept of vernacular humanities is important, whereby we decenter Europe as the universal signifier, challenging its portrayal as the sole way of being in the world, a measure of progress, development, and civilization. And so such a methodology or a conceptual basis of vernacular humanities, it embodies decoloniality that celebrates rather than disparages the local. And instead of exoticizing it as the recovery of an authentic self, and that's also one area which we must avoid. So this decolonial, or this notion of vernacular humanities, seeks social critical modes of inquiry to theorize the post-colonial moment, the context shaping our individual and collective lives, the Anthropocene questioning humanity's future, and the economic and political upheavals we face. So yeah, so I think it's important for any engagement with the local as intimate as a way of theorizing, must also caution against this temptation of trying to recover some kind of authentic self or some kind of an authentic past. And this is where I think our critical reflection to try and understand our post-colonial moment must be a critical and an important feature of such local histories. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful response. Now I'll turn to Dr. Castan. And this is again a question that really reflects on my own reading of your work and my understanding of the projects you're doing. So the questions, there are two of them. How is our understanding of both India and Pakistan enhanced by regional histories? And then secondly, how do regional histories, or an approach that's grounded in a regional history approach, contribute to our understanding of partition in particular?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I think maybe the sign.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Anne Murphy, for your question, and thank you, everybody, and Dr. Kolachima, and the conference in general to have invited me here. I'm very happy to be here in Faisalabad, despite the fact, and maybe because of the fact that I'm not specialized in regional history, and not specialized in Faisalabad, and not specialized in Punjabi history, but I'm very happy to contribute and to have this reflection around regional history with you. So I have been leading more a comparative approach, but this comparative approach led me to question the sense of regional cultures and history. So I will start answering your question with very general, even common terms. And after I will turn to my field of research, which is, as Anne mentioned, partition on the one hand, and South Asian literature and literary tradition on the other hand. And I'm very happy to speak here as a literary scholar and to contribute to bring literature into the debate on regional history. So, of course, yes, partition scholarship has a strong relationship with regional history. But I would say that it goes in both ways. That first, on the one hand, yes, regional histories contribute to our understanding of partition as an event and its long consequences on population in India and Pakistan and outside India and Pakistan. On the other hand, examining partition as a long process allows to understand more deeply the regional dynamics. This is clearly shown by partition historiography, whether in India or in Pakistan, which remains in a way quite regional. Punjab, but also Sindh and Bengal, for example, have developed specific reaction and relationship to partition and consequently have mostly been treated separately by historians. And still, it is very complex to compare 1947 history in Bengal and in Punjab, for example, and even more in Sindh. And it is very complex to develop a comparative regional approach to partition history. But more specifically, as a literary scholar, I have to question the language in which fictions and poetry have been written. These languages, whether it is Punjabi or Bengali on the one hand, or Urdu and Hindi on the other hand, have their proper history and are linked to the idea and to the effects of partition. Punjabi and Bengali, as regional and transborder languages, are in a way partition languages, as many have shown before me, as Dr. Anne Murphy has shown for Punjabi. And I think this idea and this theme would be discussed during this conference. And on the other hand, Hindi and Urdu are more or less bearing the mark of religious community, of course, and are also at the core of partition dynamics. So when I think of regional histories, I have to think of unbordered regional histories that are clearly put into light by literature and literary traditions in South Asia, and notably through these unbordered languages that are Punjabi and Bengali. So these traditions and production incite us to work across borders. Literature reveals a will to, consciously or unconsciously, deny partition by drawing upon a common culture, as shown, for example, by the famous poem by Amrita Pritam, Aaj Akan Varishanu. Sorry, I don't know Punjabi, so maybe my accent is very bad. Or shown in Bengali by a poem by Jibanananda Das, which is called 1947, which describes the 1,000 Bengali villages torn by partition as a fratricide. In early post-partition poetry, whether it was in Punjabi, in Hindi, in Urdu, or in Bengali, partition is presented as a separation of a cultural group that leads to deception. I said deception in relation with the famous poet Farib by Urdu poet Ali Sardar Jafri. So as many have shown, including Anne, writing in a partition language such as Punjabi, but also such as Bengali, is a way of producing a form of counterfactual history of partition. So the perception of this moment of separation, partition, and the long consequences is obviously common on both sides of the border, whether in Punjab, in Bengal, in Sindh, or in Kashmir even. But on the other side, we cannot deny that partition also belongs to national dynamics above regional dynamics. I will show that in my paper tomorrow, the way the politics in India and in Pakistan really were specific to each other regarding the migration issues. So I must say that partition, to answer your question, of course, regional dynamics are deeply linked to partition history, but this, the partition history is a combination of regional and national dynamics and issues. Thank you.
For keeping to time. Thank you so much for your response and your contribution to the ideas we're thinking through today. And last, but not least, of course, is Mr. Zulqurnain. Sir? So I thought it would be appropriate to end with your question, also in order to kind of frame our task here over these 2 days. So in your view, as a major force behind this conference, why does regional history matter? And what do you think studying the history, why do you think studying the history of Lyallpur is so important? And what can it give us?
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. First of all, I would like to apologize for a delay in joining you. I was obliged to, under obligation, to see our chief guest off. And I must also admit that I am the probably least learned person in this room, and I feel a bit embarrassed to be sitting alongside all of you. But it's an honor to see all of you here and to talk about regional history, and also coming from Lyallpur, it's very encouraging to see a very healthy mix of males and females in this room, which normally you don't see, and to understand and to learn history. As I said, I'm a layman, but you see, as I understand, and I'll take probably a broader view. In Pakistan, generally, I don't know why, but we have a fear of recognizing and celebrating regions, ethnicities, various religions. Probably we were not like that, but gradually that's how we become. And instead of celebrating our diversity, we try to, find unity in things which probably, I don't want to go into the details, but they don't really unite, they, further disintegrate us. But as all of you have said, and we understand, the importance of regions, areas, cities, they're lost when you are talking about global things or a region, like South Asia or Pakistan context. We lose the importance of various regions. And from my layman's perspective, if you look into the regional communities, maybe we can find more unity, because in the regions, in the communities, you can probably understand the people and the culture more easily. We have also sometimes the lines between the religion and the culture have been blurred. While the culture belong to regions, and we all embrace those, choose to embrace those cultures, but now probably the, I would say, unnatural religious divides have also tried to divide the cultures. I just was talking to Dr. Pashura Singh last night. Last month when I landed in Vancouver, so I was pleasantly surprised to hear announcements in English, French and Punjabi, and I was really thrilled. But then I realized it's not because of my Punjab, it's because of the East Punjab, because the second largest community there are Sikhs, and I still loved it. Again, as a layman, apart from the blood relations, what I always think is there are two things which I cannot change. or nobody can change. You can change your country of residence, your nationality, your passport. You can even, people change their religions. But you can't change your mother tongue and your birth city. So that, you see, that, you see, for me, as a layman, is, you see, emphasizes the importance of the regions and its history. As we were talking, there is a lot of, all of you have said, and Madam Commissioner also said, there's a lot of regional history here, and we should be able to learn about it, how the communities lived together, how were we before. There are many untold stories which youngsters don't know. As we were discussing, this region was, the Muslims were in minority in this region. So the partition obviously resulted in a lot of migration, both ways. And we have not heard or read of any serious violence during that period in this region. In fact, what I have read is that one of the largest, you see, convoys of mainly Sikh community was safely escorted out of this area, comprising of close to 100,000 people, only to be stopped at Baloki by the government to negotiate transfer of Muslim civil servants to Karachi safely, the train. And after that negotiation, this was, so there was no intercommunal violence in this area, which is very wide, at least I don't know of that. So that means that while there were differences between people living here, belong to various religions, there was also some kind of harmony. And we need to understand and study that. And while South Asia, as we just mentioned, probably in my opinion, South Asia is could be the biggest economic region in the world, because to some extent we understand each other's languages, and we have similar cuisine, similar food, similar culture, more or less overlapping cultures. And because of obviously some political reasons, that's not happening. But within South Asia, within various countries, we have so many ethnicities, so many regions, and they all, you see, then knit together to form the overall a nation or a region, a bigger region, subcontinent. For that to, you see, be, I would say, we should do that to be in the more civilized sense, progressive, and having a better understanding of the people. I think it's very important to understand and celebrate the diversity of regions and understand the cultures. Before ending the last, I would like to point out especially the changes in Lyallpur which has taken place, and we need to do some research on that and understand it and document it. Originally established as a canal district, canal area rather. It was not even a district. It was just probably a place where they would collect grain and transport it, and gradually it developed into a small town, and then it became the district. And because it was as we were discussing last night, this region was a cotton growing area. And because of that, the ginning factories and spinning factories came into this area pre-partition and after partition, while because of waterlogging, the cotton belt moved south, but textiles stayed in the city. For quite some decades, this was only known as textile city, and people used to call it the Manchester of Pakistan. And I was a guest at one of the conferences organized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan, and a gentleman said very rightly so that we should stop, you see, being a Manchester of Pakistan. We should be now more than that. But that is happening. I have seen the culture change. It used to be, city used to comprise of 3 types of people. They were this upper class, which we called upper class, maybe owners of various factories. And then there were some intelligentsia, the advocates, doctors, and then there was worker class. There was otherwise no professional middle class apart from those, I would say, 1 or 2 professions in the city. And the so-called upper class, they gradually migrated, and I call them expatriates of Lyallpur, from out of Lyallpur. But then you see, we have over the last 10-15 years, we have seen a massive transformation of this area and the culture also. We have seen a lot of other industries like chemicals, pharmaceuticals, plastics, automobile, can manufacturing. They are all coming into Faisalabad, and that is, you see, transforming the culture also, because that is bringing in a lot of professionals because needed for the management. And that is transforming the culture of the city. We, as a school-going young boy, I still remember I heard people talking about being Mahajar and Muqami in this place. The people who migrated from East Punjab to this place, they were called Mahajars. And you could, even in their Punjabi, you can clearly identify that this is a different type of a dialect. But eventually it all merged, and now we don't see any difference. So with all these, I would say, scattered thoughts, I can say that it is very important, as I said in my speech also, to understand and document regional history for our generations to know what is the importance of this region. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much for your contribution. So before I close this session, and we can all go have some tea, I want to ask if anyone has any last words they'd like to share before we close. Yeah. Okay. Can I close with just one?
Yeah, sure.
2 minutes, I promise. An anecdote, which is just thinking regionally. I'm thinking about where I live in British Columbia, again, where Punjabi is a major language. And I was thinking earlier in the opening session about the Ghadar movement, right? The movement of revolution, the anti-colonial movement that was founded in Oregon in 1913. And the connections with Northern California, across Northern California, Oregon, Washington State, and British Columbia, and how important that is to the regional history of British Columbia, and at the same time, part of a larger history of decolonization, of revolutionary activism, linking us in a kind of, again, global and yet deeply regional set of histories. And that came to mind, actually, because I was thinking about Ghadar, because I was thinking about this conference and its organizers and the Lyallpur Literary Council, and thinking that you're all Ghadaris, right? That you're embracing a kind of revolution in the way of thinking about this place. And I just want to commend you for your initiative and what you're doing here today, and for having us all here today. So thank you.
Thank you so much to all the speakers of our plenary session for such a great discussion about the importance of regional history.